Hi, welcome to the Murder Mukbang Show. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Brittany.
And we're going to eat some food and talk about murder. Because there's a lot of shit going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
Which we're not going to talk about.
Nope.
We're just going to talk about murder. And we like to talk about a man who likes to rape and molest and eat children. So, you ready to get started?
Yeah, he's a real winner.
All right, so let's tell him who we're doing.
All right, so today we are going to be talking about Albert Howard Fish. He was born on May 19th, 1870 in Washington, D.C., of all places, which I don't know how I feel about that, knowing that somebody like this was born so close to where I was born. Kind of makes me feel
I'm pretty sure that there's probably other people that are just as fucked up.
Oh, yeah. There's psychopaths in D.C. right now, probably.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, but, yeah. Okay.
Anyways. So, Mr. Albert Fish, in the 1870s when he was born, his father was 75 years old. That's really old.
He was 43 years older than the mother.
Yeah.
Like, that's just crazy. But different time, I guess.
Different time. But still, I think even back then, that's
weird.
75
years old. How do they even have sex?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, anyways, so Albert's father died 5 years after he was born. So his mother, having 6 children because Albert had 5 other siblings. And by the way, Albert wasn't even born Albert. His name was Hamilton. Which is why we are eating what we are eating today, ham and eggs.
Ham and eggs.
Because that is what the children used to call him and make fun of him when he was a child. So he actually changed his name to Albert, which was one of his deceased siblings' names. So weirdo already starting off, on the wrong foot, changed his name
at a young age.
At a young age to somebody that's dead.
Maybe he just really didn't want to get made fun of anymore and be called ham and eggs.
Yeah, that's true. Well, anyway, so he changed his name to Albert. He was the youngest of his siblings. All of his siblings had to go to an orphanage when his dad died. His mom just couldn't take care of them altogether. And 3 of his siblings, including himself, all suffered with mental illnesses, including his mom as well. Now, back then, it wasn't a study. There wasn't psychologists or psychiatrists or therapists or anything. So there's not really any documentation on what they actually had. It's just documented that they had mental illnesses.
Yeah.
Ashley and I have come up with our own opinions on symptoms that he had and the stories that we're going to talk about later. But we kind of feel that he may have been schizophrenic or something very similar. He suffered from this at a very young age.
Yep. Now,
Mr. Albert went to a orphanage. Of course, we talked about that. And this was a religious orphanage. I don't know if it was ever said that if it was Catholic or anything like that. Yeah. But they had religious figures there disciplining the children. And spankings were a big thing back then. Spankings and whippings. And young Mr. Albert discovered at a young age that turned him on. He liked it. He liked watching other boys get beat, and he also liked to get beat, and he would get erections as he was getting beat.
Yeah, he was only like 12 years old when he started having homosexual tendencies. And so, of course, during that time period, being a homosexual was a huge no-no. And so he had to keep everything quiet. He wasn't allowed to be open about it. And I guess he would go to, the public, baths. And he would watch boys, undress and take a bath.
So he got his jollies off at a young age. He learned what he liked really, really young. And at 12 years old, he began a homosexual relationship with a telegraph boy. Now, this boy was older than him. I believe he was 17.
I believe so.
Albert was introduced by this boy to, let me try to pronounce these words correctly, urolagnia and coprophagia. Now, if you guys don't know what that means the desire and the sexual gratification of consuming urine and feces.
Yeah.
Pee-pee and poo-poo, you guys.
Pee-pee and poo-poo. That's like the term golden shower.
Uh-huh.
That's what that means.
That's what that means. So at 12 years old, Albert's already doing the weird shit.
I think he probably had to have been molested himself.
I'm sure.
And it caused him to be like that.
It never said anything in any of the articles I read.
Yeah.
If he was molested or anything
Right.
like that. But he did have a mental illness. And he had weird sexual fetishes like being beat
Yeah,
at the orphanage.
Yeah, he got off on it.
Yeah. So that was Albert's early life.
So now we're going to talk about his early adulthood. And in 1890, he moved to New York City, and there he became a prostitute in order to make money. Because, you know, that's an awesome job, but I guess if that's all he had, then that's what he had to do. And eventually he became a house painter, and that's how he made his money. But starting out, he had to be a prostitute, and that's when he began really like molesting young boys and raping them, basically. So then in 1898, he was 28 years old, and his mom was like, my son is not married and he's doing some weird things.
And he's a weirdo.
So I'm going to go ahead and arrange a marriage for him. So she set him up with a family friend, Anna Mary Hoffman. And together they got married, and they had six children, which one of them was actually named Albert Fish Jr. So I guess he really wanted to carry on that Albert name, you know, of that dead sibling. And so even though he was married, he continued to molest children. It's not really known if he molested his own kids. I speculate that he probably did, but they kind of, like, after everything happened with their dad, they went their own separate ways, did their own thing, and that's it. Nothing was ever heard from them again. So one day, a male lover of his took him to like a science wax museum. And there he saw a penis that had been bisected, and also a child that had been like dissected, and like, you know, you could see the parts of his body and stuff like that. And at that point, that's when Albert decided that he really liked the sexual mutilation in order to have some gratification. And it said that he actually even ejaculated. That's such a dirty word.
Yeah, it is.
It's just gross. Yeah. After seeing both the child and the penis. So at that point, he started to do sexual mutilations to himself, and he actually eventually he inserted like needles into his perineum, which, if you guys don't know what that is, the slang term is the grundle. So, you know, that prime area right between your butthole and your ball sack. So in 1910, Albert became friends with a boy named Thomas Kenan, who was 19 years old, and he possibly had some mental disabilities. And there's not really anything that is said about Thomas, other than the fact that he did have the mental disabilities, but we don't really know what happened to him after this whole incident with him and Albert occurred. So we couldn't find any more information like on what his disability actually was. But at some point, Albert took Thomas back to a farmhouse and held him there hostage for 2 weeks. It's not really known exactly what he did during those 2 weeks, but eventually he decided that he was his original intent was to kill him, dismember his body, and you know, take the guy's flesh back to like his apartment and stuff. But I think he was worried, like with the heat and everything, that the body was just going to decompose too fast, and then he wasn't going to be able to, that he was going to get caught, basically. So what he did instead, because it is such a better idea, he cut the guy's penis in half. So do you think he cut the penis off, or do you think he just cut it in half?
I think he cut the tip of this guy's penis off.
Oh. Okay.
Like, they were probably in the middle of whatever.
Him raping him and beating him, probably.
And just right, just the tip.
And so during his confession, Albert said, "I shall never forget his scream or the look he gave me." So what does he do? He fucking pours peroxide on the wound, wraps the penis in a Vaseline-soaked cloth, and gives him a $10 bill and sends him on his way. And it's like, bye. And that's it. And
Hope you're okay.
Yeah. We don't know what happened to Thomas. We don't know if he died there. We don't know anything else about him. That's it. So moving on, in 1917, Albert's wife actually left him for another man. It actually was a handyman that was living like in the same house as Albert Fish and his wife and children. And so she just left him with the 6 kids. And she's like, okay, bye. I'm going to go fuck this other guy now. And so, that's got to fuck a guy up, right? So he actually starts hearing voices, and apparently voices from John the Apostle. And he says, the voice, John the Apostle, tells Albert to wrap himself in a carpet and then have his kids beat him. Like, okay. So that's weird. So then that's when the self-mutilation actually began, sticking the needles into his grundle area. But not only that, he also took like a nail-studded paddle. Like I picture a ping pong paddle, but could be wrong. Or do you picture a long paddle?
I think, well, they didn't have ping pong paddles back then, but I'm picturing like a square.
Okay.
With a big ass handle on it.
All right. Well, anyways, it had nails sticking out of it, and so he would basically beat himself with that paddle just to have some sexual gratification, which is fucked up. He would also take wool. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but he would also take wool and stick it in his butthole and light it on fire. Like, that's how fucked up this guy was. Like, he was lighting stuff on fire next to his anus. Like,
he could not get off unless he was doing this crazy shit to himself. And unless he was causing himself pain.
It's disgusting.
He wasn't happy.
No. So then, well, how did Albert choose his victims? Well, it's really fucked up. So he chose his victims based on race and mental disabilities. So he figured that if he were to kidnap a black boy or kidnap a boy who had Down syndrome, nobody would go looking for them or nobody would miss them, which is fucked up.
Yeah.
So that's how he chose them. So the majority of the people that he molested or he raped had mental disabilities or had a different ethnicity.
Yeah.
And another thing is that he actually would hire he would hire boys that would lure other boys to him, and he basically would torture them with what he called his implements of hell. And actually 2 of the boys that he was probably going to molest found the implements of hell, which were a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a handsaw underneath of Albert's bed. And they were like, fuck this, and they got the hell out of Dodge. So it's unknown how many people he molested. He says it's like 100 something, but nothing can actually be proven. But it's 1930, 1917 at this time, and so, he could probably get away with a lot of shit. So then in May of 1930, Albert was arrested for writing an obscene letter to a woman who had written like an advertisement, a classified ad in the newspaper. And there, at that point, he was sent to a psychiatric hospital. I believe it was Sing Sing in New York. And there he was put under psychiatric evaluation, but then was released.
Yep.
And that was it. Not like the story is not over.
No, the story is definitely not over, but that
should
chapter is over.
Yeah.
He pretty much got away with everything that he had done up to that point. He was actually in jail for larceny?
I think so. At one point he was, yes.
Yeah. So, before I get started on the next part of the story, for dessert, we actually have orange cream shakes from Arby's.
Arby's. Oh.
Free advertisement, Arby's.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're fucking welcome. Anyway, I've already had this.
I have not.
But Ashley has not had this.
Nope.
So, I'm gonna drink this now. You can drink yours whenever. But it's delicious, you guys. If you have not had it yet, go out and get it. So, moving on with the story. Oh my god, that's so good. That's so good.
I can't wait. I'm super excited about it now.
All right, so this is not his next victim, but the timeline is kind of messed up because the next victims that Ashley is going to talk about after I speak about this one actually occurred first, but Albert was never caught. Some of the bodies were never even found. He actually didn't get on the radar until this murder that I'm about to talk about. So Grace Budd was an 8-year-old girl from New York. That's where she lived with her family, the Budd family. On May 25th, Albert had saw a classified ad in the paper about a 18-year-old named Edward Budd that was seeking work. Now, Albert initially was going to go to the Budd's residence to pick up Edward because he was planning on mutilating him and murdering him. Now, once Albert got to the residence, Edward wasn't there. He was greeted by Mrs. Budd, and while they were sitting down at dinner talking about what Albert was going to be offering her son as a job, that's where he laid his eyes on little Grace for the first time. Now, of course, we don't have any reference of how he was around this child, but Ashley and I have done some research, and we've watched some movies and some videos on this, and one of the movies that we watched for research was called The Gray Man. Did you actually watch it?
I didn't watch that one.
Oh, okay.
Because you said it was creepy, and
I didn't want to get freaked
out.
So they did a really good job with this actor playing Albert. The scene where he's actually talking to the Budd family and Grace comes in the room, his attention immediately goes to her, and that's all he focuses on. And I just picture that's what it was like in real life. I feel like as soon as he saw her, he just was immediately enamored with her. And
well, I mean, because he said, as soon as he saw her, and she even came up and gave him a kiss.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's the moment that I made my decision that I was going to eat her.
He wanted to eat her, you guys.
Like it's a fucking calling.
So anyway, they were at the dinner table talking about this job that Edward wanted, and Albert was going to take him back to his farm, and he was going to work on the farm with him. Well, Albert then said that he had to leave, that he had a previous engagement. His
I'm sorry.
Is it so good?
It's so good.
It's so good, you guys. Anyway, so he said that he had a previous engagement at his sister's house. It was his niece's birthday, and she was having a birthday party. So Albert came up with this evil, ingenious idea that he wanted to get Grace away from the family. He made up his mind that he wanted her, and he was going to do whatever it took to get her away from the family. So he made up this lie about going to a birthday party. At first, the Budds were reluctant. They didn't know him. He seemed like a very nice guy, and he was going to be giving their son a job. But then again, this is also their 8-year-old daughter, and they're like, I don't really know if this is a good idea.
Right.
But then Albert decides that he's going to whip out this giant wad of cash and asks Grace if she's a good counter. Well, she said yes. Grace counts the money. He had $98.52 or $92.58, something like that.
Which back in 1928 is a lot of money.
That is a lot of money back then. That is the most money that any of the Budds had ever seen at one time. So, then Mr. Bud, he kind of overruled his wife and was like, look, this guy's got a lot of money. He seems like he's a really nice guy. He's got to come back at 9 o'clock to get Edward anyway. We're just going to let Grace go with him. I'm sure everything will be fine. Well,
Never is.
it never is. And that was the last time either of the Bud parents saw Grace.
So my first question immediately is, they let this man take their 10-year-old daughter to a birthday party, and then she goes missing. At that point, why wasn't the police called on this man? I mean, he did give them a false name.
Yes.
But they still could have given a description of what he looked like, I would assume.
I would just think that police work wasn't the same back then, and
Yeah.
they did have another suspect, actually. Charles Edward Pope. He was arrested for the disappearance of Grace.
Because his wife was disgruntled.
Yes, and lied.
And lied.
And he spent 108 days in jail for a crime that he did not commit. So they had no answers. Nobody knew what happened to Grace.
Didn't find her body.
Didn't find her body. Albert had disappeared. The Buds had, done a couple of interviews. They received letters from people, but everything kind of just died down. Like, they forgot about it.
Yeah.
The police forgot about Grace. And the media forgot about Grace. She just disappeared. Then, on November in 1934, Mrs. Budd received an anonymous letter in the mail that came from Albert. I actually have what was written in the letter, and I'm going to read it word for word.
It's very
It's graphic.
It's very graphic. It's disturbing.
It's disturbing.
Very disturbing. So if you don't want to hear it, turn the fucking channel off.
Fast forward like a minute if you don't want to hear this letter.
You better read fucking fast.
I'm just kidding. If you don't want to listen to this, then why the fuck are you on this channel?
Exactly. Don't.
Moving on.
Goodbye. We really appreciate all of our listeners
We
and
do.
watchers.
We do. I'm just kidding, guys.
Okay,
Anyway.
Read the letter.
I took her to an empty house in Westchester. I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped off all of my clothes. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When I was ready, I went to the window and called to her. Then I hid in the closet until she was in the room. When she saw me there all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her, and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not fuck her, though I could have, had I wished. She died a virgin.
That's fucked up.
Reading that makes my skin crawl.
Yeah, it makes me sick to my stomach.
Like, could you imagine being that mother and just... First of all, the mom didn't know how to read.
Yeah.
So she had to have these things read to her. And I couldn't imagine
couldn't.
being one of the siblings to Grace and reading this letter and just being like, having to read that to your mom and then everybody listening to it at once. And finally, after 7 years of not knowing what happened to Grace, you know what happened, and it's fucked up.
It is. It's absolutely disturbing that she received that letter.
Yes. So the letter itself came in an envelope that had a hexagon shape on it that was traced back to the New York Chauffeurs Association.
Benevolent.
Benevolent Association. Now that envelope was traced back to a janitor that had worked for this company, and he had taken some of these envelopes home with him, I guess, to use for his own personal whatever. I read a couple articles that this janitor was actually a known petty thief. Like, he would steal things from his jobs all the time. Like, just
so
random things.
So he probably stole them.
He stole these envelopes, and he didn't even use them. Like, he left them in his old apartment, and that is how Albert got his hands on them. So when the police tracked this janitor down, he had told them, you know, this is where I was living, but then he took that statement back. He was like, oh, actually, I was living here before I moved to this place, so that's where these things are from. Now, when the police went back to that apartment that the janitor said he had lived at, the landlady was shown a picture. Was she not? No, she was given a description of Albert, what he looked like, and she said, yes, that sounds like the tenant that stays in my building. So the police looked through the records of, you know, the lease agreements, and he had signed his name, Albert H. Fish. Now, the problem was Albert kind of moved around a lot. He was never in one place too long. Like, he had a really weird schedule, and even the land people, they said, like, he has weird hours. Like, he's never here.
Yeah.
He sleeps weird hours. Like,
It's because he's out molesting children.
So he actually hadn't been back to that residence in months, and that was kind of the dead end. And
I think it was like 5 months later he finally returned.
He finally returned 5 months later, and when he went in for questioning, he didn't deny murdering Grace. He actually stated that he had never thought of raping her. However, when he strangled her, he ejaculated twice, involuntarily. During Grace's murder trial, it was deemed to be sexually motivated, but none of the cannibalism
Was talked about. Like no big deal.
Yeah.
Like, he just murdered this 10-year-old girl and ate her body. But we're not going to talk about that because since he ejaculated while strangling her, it must have been a sexually motivated crime.
The only thing they found left of this girl, by the way, was a skull and a part of her foot.
Yeah.
He ate everything else.
That's disgusting. We're not going to talk about cannibalism. So next, so this was in 1934 that he confessed to Grace's murder. But prior to that, after his arrest, it actually came out that there were two other victims of Albert Fish. The first one was Francis McDonald. He was actually the son of a cop who went missing July 19th, 1924. And he was found hanging in a wooded area. He, I guess, was a Boy Scout or something like that. Yep. And he was like 8 years old. And so like the whole Boy Scout troop like came along and, you know, I guess
they're the ones that discovered his body.
They're the ones who discovered his body in the woods. And so what they found upon that was that he had been sexually assaulted, given mutilated, and strangled with his own suspenders and then hung in a tree. According to the autopsy, he had extensive lacerations on his abdomen and legs, and his left hamstring was almost completely stripped of the flesh. Like you basically could see the bone. And so that piece of flesh was taken and eaten, we presume. Mm-hmm. And so there were several witnesses, including Francis's mother, who said that they all described seeing an elderly man with a mustache the day that Francis went missing. And that's when the police dubbed him as the Gray Man. And originally, after like he had gotten arrested for Grace's murders, he denied any claims like of this boy's disappearance or killing him completely. Yeah. But then finally in 1935 he was like, yeah, I was the one who killed Francis. And then he also at that time confessed to killing a poor tiny little baby named Billy Gaffney, who was only 4 years old. And this kind of, you know, is rough for me to talk about because I have children that are close to that age. But poor Billy went missing on February 11th, 1927. His body has never been recovered even to this day. Apparently Billy had been playing in an apartment like hallway with a couple other boys. There was actually a 3-year-old boy there named Billy Beaton who Albert actually took him as well, but left him on the roof of the apartments, and that's where the police found him. And when they were questioning him, he said that the boogeyman took Billy. And so they got a description from this 3-year-old boy, you know, like with the gray mustache and everything. And I had also read that there was there was an eyewitness that said that they saw an old man, an elderly man with a young boy who was crying on the trolley, and he was calling out for his mom, and like nobody did anything about it because they just assumed. I mean, I can't say that I would do something about it. You know, they're crying for mommy. I mean, my kids turn on me and my husband all the time, you know, try to turn us against each other. So it's not extremely out of the ordinary, but poor Billy, he was tortured and murdered. And another letter from Albert states the following, and this is only partial, and so I didn't want to read the whole thing because it's really fucked up. So I'm going to read the most fucked up part, I guess. I took tools, a good heavy cat of 9 tails. Can't read my notes, which is like a whip that has several different things coming off of it. He said he used his own belt to do it. Homemade short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit these half in 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his bare behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. I picked up 4 old potato sacks and gathered a pile of stones. I cut him up. I had a grip with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in the grip. What is a grip? I don't know what a grip is. I'm going to assume it's like a bag or something. Yeah. Then I cut him through the middle of his belly, just below his belly button. Then through his legs about 2 inches below his head. Then through his legs about 2 inches below his behind. I put... Oh my God, can I not fucking read? I'm stumbling. I'm sorry.
It's difficult to read things that are really old because the wording is not
awful.
Yeah.
Hands and the legs below the knee. This I put in sacks weighed with stones, tied the ends, and threw them into the pools of slimy water you will see along the road going to North Beach. Water is 3 to 4 feet deep. They sank at once. Sorry, I can't read. I am in elementary school. So yeah, that's what he did with his body.
So
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to these murders, and I feel like one of the reasons why he was not caught for these 2 murders, because these were before Grace, I feel like they weren't believing that an old man was responsible for these murders because the bodies were so badly mutilated. Sorry. And the first boy was so brutally raped, and this is a little bit graphic, but he had so much semen inside of his body that the person that did the autopsy was like, there's no way that this was an old man. Ugh. There's no way. Like, this is a man in his prime. Mm-mm. As in a 20 to 30-year-old male. There's no way that a 75-year-old man could do this.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't.
He was in his 70s. I'm not sure if he was 75 exactly, but he was
old. He was old. He was a decrepit old man, but apparently not decrepit.
No, when they actually cornered him, when they were going to arrest him for Grace's murder, he pretended like he was a feeble old man, and then this motherfucker pulled a blade out of his pocket and was going to try to fight 2 detectives. Like, He has
come at me, bro.
He has superhuman strength. Like, I feel like the evilness in him.
It must be the flesh of the children.
It must be. It was either the human flesh that made him so strong, or it was the fact that he was so evil.
Yes, I think so. You look at pictures of him and you just tell he has dead eyes.
Yeah. He was a creepy dude.
Yeah.
So, moving on. The trial for Grace Budd's murder began in March 11th, 1935. Albert pled insanity. And the people on the jury, they were like, yeah, we think he's
hold on. Okay, I'm sorry.
We think he's insane. Everybody agreed, like, there's something not right mentally with this guy. But they were like, we can't risk him walking, so we're going to say that he's sane, and we're going to electrocute him. We're going to put him to death. So...
mixed feelings on this situation.
I also have mixed feelings on this, because if he was extremely sick, like, in the mind, which... yeah. After researching all this,
obviously he was.
Obviously he was not mentally stable at all.
Yeah.
Like, he had religious mania. That is one thing that they did say that he had. But he was a psycho.
Yeah.
And he obviously, anybody that knew about this and anybody that had conversations with him knew that he was 100% insane, but they could not risk
letting him back out into society
to go do these things again. So.
Because who knows? He wouldn't have stopped.
He would not have stopped.
I think there is a part of him that wanted to get caught, though.
Yeah.
That's why he sent the letter to Grace's mom.
I agree.
So
Albert was actually sentenced to death, and he was electrocuted on January 16th, 1936, via the electric chair. And I also read that they had to electrocute him twice.
Oh, did you? I didn't read that.
Yep.
Oh.
They had. He
that
did not.
Motherfucker didn't want to die.
He didn't die the first time,
what
you guys.
The fuck?
They had to do it twice.
Ugh.
Yeah. Does that not like?
All I picture is, like, you know that scene from The Green Mile when that French guy was getting electrocuted, but the sponge wasn't wet because Percy was a dick and didn't wet the sponge, and then he basically just burned to death. Like, that's what I imagine that happened to him.
So yeah, they had to electrocute him twice. And he also had written a lot more letters while he was incarcerated to his lawyer. His lawyer said that the things that he read in that letter were the most filthy string of obscenities that he had ever read in his life, and kept those letters a secret. To this day, nobody knows
what they said, unless they're still out there. I mean, if anybody does know about them, please let us know, because
I couldn't find anything.
I couldn't find anything either. I looked.
So yeah,
just it's really weird about how some of the things in this case just ended. You know, the Thomas Kenan, like he just disappeared off the face of the earth. You know, and like I just everything is fucking weird.
Yeah,
these letters. I want to know what they said.
I'd also want to know what they said.
I mean, because if these letters
are like the PG-13,
yeah,
I want to know what the rated R.
Triple X.
The triple X letters are. I want to know what that is.
Gross.
So there was other potential victims, but I don't feel like we need to.
No. So there's nothing else that is verified that he killed anybody else. There's a whole list of names of people that are suspected that he killed between the ages of 6 and 17. So who knows? We don't know.
We don't know.
So that's it. That's our Albert Fish story.
That's our Albert Fish story, guys.
On ham and eggs.
On ham and eggs.
All right.
Mr. Hammy Eggs. Sicko.
Do we want to discuss what we talked about at work?
Oh, I mean, we might as well. Look,
Brittany has freaked me the fuck out.
Look, I am an honest person to the point where sometimes
it's too much.
It's too much and people can't handle it. But we've been doing a lot of research on the cannibal things this week, and it's made me start thinking and made me very curious. I told Ashley that if the situation came about, I gotta talk about this diplomatically, because some people might think
some people are gonna think that you're a fucking psycho, which you are.
Look, guys, if I knew where it came from and I was given the opportunity, and it was somebody that had donated their body for that purpose to be consumed, I would test human meat.
Ugh, I just want to throw up in my
Just
mouth
to
right now.
know what we taste like. What happens if we're like the most fucking delicious meat on the fucking planet?
It doesn't fucking matter, okay?
Look.
It's a fucking human being, okay? So she's like, so she tells me this, and I'm like, no, that's weird. And she's like, I can't be the only person who thinks that. We took a consensus at work. And guess what? She's a fucking weird. The only person. And I'm like, how many employees do we have? Like,
20?
Where we work?
Yeah. 20?
Okay, we'll go with 20.
I don't know. Something like that.
19 people.
I've also talked to my family. I've talked to my boyfriend about this, and nobody else agrees with me. But I know it's a thing because I've read forums about it. Like,
yeah, on the fucking dark web.
Shh. Don't be telling the internets that I get on the dark
They
web.
fucking know. The government knows everything. They're listening now.
Listen, government.
Fuck off.
Just because my internet history is a little bit conspicuous does not mean that I'm a murderer, okay?
I'm gonna have to Google how to get on the dark web.
That doesn't work. You can't Google how to get on the dark web and expect to get on the dark web. It's not how it works, guys.
Okay, well, I don't know how to get on the dark web, apparently. So that's why I don't get on it.
Anyway, so if you feel a little bit different about me because I would test human meat, sorry.
If I end up dead, she probably ate me. So I'm just just kidding.
Well,
that's it.
That's it, guys.
That's our story for this week.
That is our story.
All right. Thanks for watching.
Thanks
for
guys.
Liking us. And continue to like us.
And watch our videos. Share it. Share it with your friends.
Yes, please do.
We need to get some more viewers on here.
Okay, well, let's not sound like we're desperate.
We're not desperate. I'm just saying we'd like some more viewers.
We would. But that's okay.
That's okay.
We'll take the ones that we have now.
Yeah.
The real troopers.
Yep.
So, won't name any names, but somebody special we work with. Mm-hmm. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Have a great day. Have a wonderful week. And we'll talk to you later. This has been the Murder Mukbang Show. You kill them.
We grill them.
Bye.
Bye, guys.